April. I do not know the date anymore. I contracted sore eyes while we waited 3 days for the ferry. My eyes swelled shut. I could not see to read or write, nor even to walk. Green and Mamma took turns holding my hand. We caught up with a cart that had some leather straps attached to the back. The driver told me I could hold on to the straps for guidance. How I hated not knowing what my feet would step into next, or what snake or alligator or other creature might sink its fangs into my ankles. I am blind in my left eye now, but I have regained good vision in my right. Another day in April. We have reached our fourth river, the Trinity. On the other side will be Aunt Nancy, a soft bed, dry clothes, and food waiting for us. But the Trinity has overflown her banks and is 10 miles wide. Of all the rivers and creeks we have crossed, this one is by far the worst. Some of the families have decided to stay here on this side and take their chances with Santa Ana, rather than cross that river. Mama says we will wait 1 or 2 days to see if the water goes down. It is dark now, and I write by the light of a campfire. I can see the lights of Liberty far away in the distance, but they might as well be on the moon. April, day unknown. The water is still rising. Mama is torn with indecision. She wants to join Aunt Nancy, but crossing the Trinity is too dangerous. The next day, a courier rode up. He told us all 400 men at Golian were massacred on Palm Sunday, taken out to the road and shot down unarmed. Mama let out a little gasp and squeezed my hand until it hurt. Then she thanked the man. She didn't cry. I think we already knew Uncle Henry had been lost. Mama just said, "What am I going to tell Nancy?" The messenger also brought word that Santa Ana has crossed the Brazos and is headed for Harrisburg, the town near the San Jacinto River, where the government of the Republic of Texas was located when we passed through. Like us, the new government is trying to keep one step ahead of the Mexican army. No word on Houston's army. 3 days later, at last we crossed the raging Trinity River. Floating logs and debris bombarded the side of the float boat, causing it to rock and teeter. It took 8 strong men to navigate. It was the most frightening experience. We located Aunt Nancy at her brother's house in Liberty. She hugged Mama and cried. Aunt Nancy pulled her children close and told them their father had gone to heaven. I could not help but think of my own dear Papa and wonder if he had escaped Santa Anna's troops. And what of Aunt Esperanza and Baby Wash? What would become of them without Uncle Isaac? And what happened to dear Lemuel? One more day in April. Today we met a man from Nacogdoches who was looking for Houston in the Texan army so he might join, but no one knows where the general is. The stranger said he had met a man named Louis Rose who claimed to have escaped from the Alamo. Mr. Rose said on the last night before the fall, Colonel Travis assembled the men, then drew a line in the sand with his sword, and gave them the choice to stay and face death or to slip away in the night. Only Mr. Rose did not step forward, and only Mr. Rose survived. Now, when I close my eyes at night, I see Willis stepping across that line, head high and shoulders squared. Unlike the time he stepped over old Ben Millam's line all those months ago, this time he must have known he would die. All of them must have known. Oh, why did those Texans have to start this scrape? Were we so bad off to justify all this misery and losing those dear lives? I am too weary to think any more. I have decided never to write again, for all I have is sad tidings. Thursday, April 21st. I have taken up my pen again, for the news is urgent. This afternoon we heard a sudden noise in the west that sounded like distant thunder. But an old man who had fought in the War of 1812 said it was cannons. The cannonade lasted about 15 minutes. The man shook his head and said, "It doesn't look very good, ladies. That's the end of General Houston and the Texas Army. Time to move on." Friday, April 22nd. All hope has washed out of my soul. We packed all day and set out for the Sabine River. which is the border between Texas and the United States. Santa Anna dares not cross that river. Aunt Nancy, her sister-in-law, the children, and Mama rode in a sturdy covered wagon pulled by 3 yoke of oxen. Green and I rode on horses with 2 Negroes. Again we go into the darkness. Saturday, April 23rd. I will never, ever forget this day. We had traveled a few miles and camped for the evening, when suddenly there was a loud ruckus. A man rode toward us furiously, waving his hand and shouting. We thought the Mexicans were upon us, and jumped up to hitch the oxen. When he got closer, he yelled, "Turn back! Turn back! The Mexicans are defeated! It's safe to go back home!" He was a colorful man with an Irish brogue. "The Texans charged the Mexican troops while they were having an afternoon siesta." Our boys shouted, "Remember the Alamo! Remember the Goliad!" And their ardor won the victory. Santa Anna was in his silken tent with a woman. He tried to escape dressed like a private, but was caught. No one would have known who he was, except his men all whispered, "El Presidente," whenever he walked by. And his shirt had diamond studs. I had never heard such whooping and yelling in all my born days. Women and children, Negroes and returning men all put up such a scene it looked like a Methodist revival meeting. They are still celebrating. Sunday, April 24th. Early this morning the row wagon passed by. I was so happy I nearly cried when I saw Mitty, but she was quiet and sad. Her dress was ripped and filthy. Her feet were bare. Her hair ribbon was in shreds. "Mama says we're going back to Missouri," Mitty said. Mrs. Rowe had lost another child, her little boy, along the way, and was very peaked looking. Mama said, "Why, Sarah Rowe, surely you ain't going to abandon your home in Gonzales. Who'll watch over your petunias?" Mrs. Rowe forced a weak smile and said, "You can have the petunias, and the Indians and the Mexicans and the mosquitoes and the alligators, Rebecca. You can have all of Texas. I've had enough." I said goodbye to Mitty, and it truly hurt. She was crying as she sat in the back of the wagon, waving goodbye. Mama climbed back into Aunt Nancy's wagon, and we turned around toward the west, toward home. "Are we going back to Missouri?" Green asked. "No, sir," Mama said. "We've put too much blood and tears in this Texas soil to turn back now. And I know your papa and Lemuel and Esperanza and baby Wash are still alive. I have a premonition in my heart." Green and I smiled at each other. We knew that Mama's premonitions were always right. Epilogue. The return trip to Gonzales took over a month and was almost as treacherous as the runaway scrape, as the fleeing of the settlers came to be called. When the weary Lawrence family arrived back at Gonzales, they found their log cabin partially burned, but Papa and Lem were waiting with open arms, and the cotton, corn, and vegetables were up and healthy. Lem had been captured by Comanche on his way to fight at the Alamo, and did not escape until many weeks later. He credited his pet crow with leading him back home. Lemuel Lawrence became a doctor, specializing in the science of animal care. He married a farm girl and raised 8 children, 2 of whom became veterinarians. Green Lawrence was bitten by gold fever in 1849 and moved to California, where he did not strike it rich. But he met and married a girl named Molly, who made a small fortune cooking and washing and selling goods to the miners. Aunt Esperanza returned to San Antonio and remarried. Wash grew tall and burly like his father. He drove cattle along the famous Chisholm Trail and later bought a ranch in Bexar County. His descendants still live there today. Mitty Rose stayed in Missouri, but wrote Lucinda often. She married a wealthy clothing merchant and had all the dresses and hair ribbons she wanted. She named her first child after her best friend. Lucinda Lawrence continued to read books and to educate herself. She attended St. Augustine Female Academy, then moved to the newly founded town called Houston and became a teacher. She married the son of a well-to-do farmer in Fort Bend. During the Civil War, Lucinda's husband and oldest son fought with Terry's Rangers, and both were killed. She moved to Galveston Island, where her youngest son prospered in the shipping business. He built a mansion, which was destroyed by the great hurricane of 1900. Lucinda returned to her beloved Gonzales, where she spent the rest of her days in a simple house on Water Street. She lived to be 83 years old.